Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Welcome back to Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. We have been in a series in which we are trying to briefly give you the responses to some of the common objections that are offered against Christianity, against the existence of God. We call these quick shots because what they're designed to be are quick responses that'll keep the conversation going. When sometimes you're in a conversation with somebody about what you believe about God or what you believe about Christianity, you're trying to explain the evidence, for example, or trying to explain the gospel to somebody, and it's not unusual to have somebody throw an objection out that can be a conversation stopper. And these responses are really designed to help you move past the roadblock, the rhetorical roadblock of objections that might come your way. And so these are called quick shots. We've been doing them. This is season 5 of Cold Case Christianity. And so we're going to do them for the entire season to help you become a better Christian communicator. You can find these on our website in the quick shot section of the website. And also you'll see them on our app. We have a phone app that will help you to look at these quickly. Look, they're designed specifically with the phone app in mind. In other words, if you're involved in a conversation and you're stuck somewhere and you have your phone, I wanted to give you a resource that would give you about a 150 word response. In other words, a response that if you open the phone app, you would see it in the first screen, one screen. Without having to scroll, you'll get everything you need to move the conversation forward. That's something you might be able to step away from the table, step away from the conversation for a second, grab the idea, grab the information, grab the strategy, and move forward. That's why we're calling these quick shots. And so we're hopefully, look, when I designed these quick shots, I realized that we are asking a lot of each other as Christians, are we not? If we're going to be able to answer the objections that are offered by the culture. Because what it means anymore is it's not enough to feel like something is true. Even to feel God's presence. A lot of people feel God's presence, and there are all kinds of different worldviews, all kinds of different religious worldviews. Don't necessarily have to be Christians in order to think you're feeling the presence of something. What we're asking is for people to take an extra step, right? For you and I to take an extra step. So while I'm offering you these quick shot responses, keep in mind that each one of them is going to require you to tap into an even deeper understanding. And what that means is if we're talking about, for example, today's show is going to be about, well, who created God? Well, we're going to have a little more foundation than just to be able to give 150 words to somebody. What if they were to ask you, okay, well, then what's the evidence you have for God? Are you prepared to share that? It's going to take a little more study on our part to become equipped enough, ready enough to be able to offer an intelligent response. Remember, a response that says, you know what, I'm not quite sure about that, let me get back to you, is still a response. And that is often the best response you can give, right? Because you're just not ready to answer that question. But here's my point. As you're going through this series with us and you're looking at some of these responses, I want you to keep in mind that you're going to have a little more knowledge than just a superficial understanding in 150 words. That being said, let's get after today's topic, and that is simply this objection that, look, if God, you're telling me as a Christian that God created everything, okay, fine, then who created God? Now that might seem like a really simple objection that maybe it's like, does anybody really offer that kind of, yeah, people offer that kind of objection all the time. I happen to know because I'm on social media a lot and I see what people say in response to posts that I post or posts that somebody else posts. And not only that, I get a lot of parents who will write to me and say this is one of the first questions that their children ask them growing up. And they're not quite sure sometimes what to say in response. Now, without having a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old in mind, I want to be able to give you a couple of ways, 3 ways really, to answer this question. To answer it in a way that actually draws out and continues the conversation. Because that's a lot what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to stop a conversation. We're not trying to debate people. We're trying to initiate a conversation that takes several more steps. So I'll go ahead and put my first response for you up on the screen, and let's talk about how you might approach it. So here it is. Okay, that question, who created God? If you think about it, in many ways, that's kind of nonsensical, right? Let me show you why. The classic definition of God, the one that we offer as Christians, the one that theists offer, people who believe in God, they basically will say it like this: God is the uncreated creator. You hear what I just said? God is the uncreated creator. That's the definition of God. So when someone asks who created God, they're really asking who created the uncreated creator. Can you see the problem there? See, here's the problem. The definition, God is by definition uncreated. So the question you're asking in some ways is kind of illogical, right? I mean, it's like asking what sound is silence? Well, silence is the lack of sound. That's what the definition is. So that question is also a little bit nonsensical, right? I mean, a lot nonsensical. Once you know the definition of a term, some questions become unreasonable. Now, can you see now how that question, who created God, is unreasonable once you know the definition of God? Now, this response really tries to tap in just on a first level response to the simple definition that we offer as theists, right? Now, I think still as an atheist, I would have pushed back on that kind of response, right? Okay, fine, so you created a definition that gets you out of the problem. That doesn't help me. That doesn't really even help you, I would have said as an atheist. So, but I'd still want us, because every time you offer levels of response on any objection, I think you have to keep in mind who you're talking to. And that person you're talking to may be satisfied that, okay, I get it, this makes sense. When you compare it to another unreasonable question like the sound of silence, okay, I can understand that. And this may be all you need to move the conversation forward. Now, I'm going to give you a couple more responses, though, that will start to unwrap the onion, unpeel the onion down through the layers to help you know all of these. And so even though I've separated out these three responses as I have, it does not mean that you're necessarily going to take them in this order, or that you're necessarily going to give only one part of the response and not maybe join two of them together. You may decide to do that, but I want you to see that this first approach to responding to the objection is really just about defining terms. And this is what happens when we spend time with jurors in criminal trials. We help them understand the definitions of legal terms so that later on they won't be confused by either side who might try to change a definition. That's a very common strategy in defense trials. Defense teams will try to change, well, what do you mean? He didn't mean it that way. What did he mean by using that expression with the victim? What does he mean by using? They want to change definitions in order to get themselves out of problems. Well, sometimes we can do that. We can be guilty of that too. But a lot of us who are non-believers will also change definitions. We talked about this before, for example, with the idea of what is nothing. If the universe came into existence from nothing, well, what do we mean by nothing? So you'll see that some people will try to change the definition of nothing to get out of the conundrum. So here, what we're trying to do is hold people to clear definitions. You'll notice that when we're speaking about philosophical issues, or even about legal issues, definitions are critical. We have to be on the same page. So this is a good place to start because it helps you to lay the foundation for the definition. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I'll give you a couple of other ways you might be able to respond to this objection.
Jay Warner and Susie Wallace have written 3 kids' books to help children know the truth and defend it in the public square. All 3 books mirror Jay Warner's adult books, chapter by chapter. And best yet, the kids' books are written as fictional stories that will turn your kids into detectives as they solve mysteries and learn about Christianity. There's also an interactive academy website at casemakersacademy.com where your kids can join other cadets and complete their own academy notebook. Each course has free videos, activity sheets, and more. Your young readers can even earn their own Junior Detective graduation certificates and appear on the Honor Cadet Wall. Be sure to visit casemakersacademy.com to learn more.
Okay, we've tried to approach this objection, first of all, by laying down the foundation, the groundwork for good definitions. That's always important. Anytime we're talking about anything philosophical, anything legal, anything theological, we want to know, well, what do you mean What is the definition of, it's just, by the way, just on an aside, this is also important when you're talking to people who have slightly twisted worldviews that are grounded in a Christian foundation. So for example, if you're talking Jehovah's Witnesses, if you're talking to Mormons, these are worldviews that are not the same as Christianity. These people cannot call themselves Christians just because they happen to use the same set of terms. The reality of it is they've changed all the definitions. So for example, Muslims believe in Jesus of Nazareth, but they do not believe that he is God incarnate. They just changed how they would define Jesus. But you wouldn't call a Muslim a Christian because you know that they may talk about Jesus in a certain way. They may even venerate him or honor him, but they do not define him in the way that we as Christians define him. This is also true for Mormonism. They may use the word Jesus, the word God, the Father. They might use the word salvation, the word heaven, but their definitions are entirely different. Definitions matter. But let's come back to our objection. Who created God? If you're saying God is the creator of everything, who created God? Well, let's just talk about that for a minute and give you another way of approaching it. In the first section, we talked about talking about definitions and why those are so important. But now what I want to talk about is the idea that, really all of us are facing the same dilemma. All of us are asking similar questions. So for when someone poses this question of me or makes a claim on my side, I just sometimes will take the time to point out this is not much different than all of us make similar claims. And so if you're going to judge one worldview harshly because it asks certain questions or makes certain claims, then you have to judge your own worldview similarly harshly if you're doing something that's the same. And that is really what's happening with an atheistic worldview. Let me put the answer on the screen here and then I'll run through it with you. So here it is. Okay, in response to this question, you might say, well, look, okay, I get it. You're asking the question, who created? Well, look, every worldview makes claims, right, about the nature of the world around us, the universe, for example. Some atheists, and I was an atheist for many years until I was 35 years old, they actually believe that the universe itself is eternal. And if that's the case, it requires no cause. Some atheists believe the universe emerged from a quantum vacuum of some sort. We just talked about that a minute ago with the idea that the universe emerged from nothing. Or that it's maybe one of many universes in a collection of multiverses. They believe this quantum environment, by the way, is eternal. You know that, right? Therefore, it requires no cause. So here's my whole point. Everyone believes in something eternal. Even as a non-Christian, I believe that either the universe was eternal or that whatever caused the universe, and I would have said it wasn't God, is eternal. Christians aren't any different than that, right? I mean, look, all of us believe in some sort of uncaused first cause. But we as Christians just believe that cause is personal rather than impersonal. That's really the only thing that separates the two of us is if you're an atheist, you believe in an impersonal uncaused first cause, and I believe in a personal uncaused cause. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is to explain, though, the personal attributes of our existence? Like the information, which we know only comes from intelligence. We find this in DNA. We have consciousness on a personal level, personal consciousness, and we even have these objective moral obligations, which are always between persons. And we sense them all throughout the history of our species. And if there's if there's a universe filled with other alien life forms like Star Trek, we would feel these moral obligations toward the Klingons and Romulans too. My point is, we all believe there are these overarching, transcendent moral obligations, and moral obligations are always between persons. You can't get those from physics. If there isn't a personal uncaused first cause, how do we explain that stuff? So we all agree there's something that is eternal, rather. We just don't agree if it's personal. Now, do you see what I'm trying to do here is to make clear that this is really not an objection that anyone can level against us if they're not also willing to answer it for themselves. Because this is the state of all of our decision making on this. We all are looking for that uncaused first cause. Why? Because if the cause of the universe is also caused, you're going to ask the question, who caused it? What caused it? And what caused the cause of it? And what caused the cause of it? We're going to go on forever doing that. And that problem of infinite regress, the only way you get around that is you propose there's something that is not itself caused. And that is the beginning. And we all believe in this. And I did this myself as somebody who's an atheist who believed in Big Bang cosmology. I believed that whatever that cause was of the first cause of the universe, that cause did not need an explanation. Well, how is that really any different than looking at God? I actually think that the evidence in the universe, if you're fair and if you look at it fairly, you'll realize that a personal, incredibly powerful, non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material cause is a better explanation for those attributes of the universe you would only get if there was a personal cause. So we have to be honest about that. That's really where the question isn't about whether we've got an uncaused first cause. The question is it personal or impersonal? And if that's the case, now you can begin to make a case for why you think it would have to be personal. And this is where we came back to what we started off talking about at the beginning of the show. Are you prepared to make that case? Because you might open up an entire Pandora's box of explanations by just suggesting that, hey, we both agree on this, all we don't disagree on is whether or not the cause is personal. Well, now someone's going to ask you, well, so why should I believe it's personal? And now you have to be ready. Now, in the book God's Crime Scene, which I wrote in an effort to try to answer this question, I think there are 8 pieces of evidence in the universe that have to be explained. And I do think the best explanation for those 8 pieces is a cause outside of the universe that is personal. But that required me to spend some time mastering the evidence for consciousness, for free agency, for moral obligations, for information in DNA. These are things that, the appearance of design in biology, the appearance of design in the cosmos, these are things that I think scream personal cause. Creative, thoughtful, intentional, purposeful, personal causes. But you're going to have to master that evidence for yourself if you hope to be persuasive with the people in your world. So that's the challenge, right? But at least I've given you a couple of ways of beginning to address the issue. 1, let's look at the definition. 2, let's make it clear that all of us are in the same position looking for an explanation for the uncaused cause of the universe. We'll take a break. We'll come back. I'll give you one that's, I think, a little bit of fun, and it's philosophical, and we'll do that right after the break.
Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. We interview the world's leading apologists to provide credible answers to curious questions.
What in the world is a 2-decision Christian?
Well, I think most of us understand what a one-decision Christian is. We make a decision to trust Christ for our salvation. And most of us who are Christians would say we've done that. The problem, I think, is, though, that we have a sense that is it really that? Is that it? And is that really helping us to have an impact on our culture? And I think most of us would say that we feel bad that we do not share our faith as much as we ought to. In other words, we feel like we're not as good of an evangelist as we should be. Yeah. But Paul tells us in Ephesians 4 that some of you are pastors, some of you are teachers, some of you are evangelists, which means some of you aren't any of those things. Some of you aren't even good at those. They're not part of the wiring that I've given you, that God has given us. But we have a duty to do those things, even though we're not great at them. And so why are we beating ourselves up over something that we may not be great at? But Peter in 1 Peter 3 has got a little different approach. He doesn't say some of you need to be ready to give a reason for the hope you have. Yeah. He says all of you need to be ready. That's not an option for us. So we can say, well, I'm not a great apologist, but a great evangelist, but I really don't need to work at that because, Billy Graham, he's called to that kind of thing. Well, guess what? We're not off the hook when it comes to being a case maker. We're all called to be case makers. He doesn't say some of you are. Mm-hmm. All of us are. And that's the second decision we have to make. And I think if you don't make that decision, a decision to trust Christ and then to make a case for what you believe about Christ, I think you're living an abbreviated Christian life. Mm-hmm. And that life is, you're saved, I get all that, but are you really able to make the kind of cultural impact? Are you able to help your students, your young kids, when they go to college, to be able to resist the offerings of the world, which are often going to be opposed to the Christian worldview? Are you really able to have any kind of impact you might have had if you'd have made the second decision to do what Peter ends up telling us we all are supposed to do anyway? We really have to get to a place where we are 2-decision Christians. I think if we can make that decision, that second decision, we will change the world with the truth we already hold to begin with.
Be sure to download the free Cold Case Christianity app from the iTunes Store and the Android Marketplace. The Cold Case Christianity app puts all the resources from coldcasechristianity.com in the palm of your hand. You can read the daily blog, listen to podcasts, and watch videos from within the application. And Jim uses the app to send direct messages to fans of Cold Case Christianity. The app will also link you to all the Cold Case Christianity social media and provide you with a direct connection to J. Warner Wallace. Download the app today and become a better Christian case maker. Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily Case Notes email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian case maker.
Okay, now we've given you two possible responses to this objection. We're going to go with one more that is a little more philosophical, and I borrowed this idea from a masterful philosopher named J.P. Moreland, who is at Biola, where I teach as an adjunct professor of apologetics. But of course, J.P. is a master, and he's a professor there at Biola. We all kind of stand on J.P.'s shoulders when it comes to examining the Christian worldview from a philosophical perspective. And I will tell you that his book with William Lane Craig on the philosophical foundations for a Christian worldview is sitting on my shelf back here, and it is one of the most important books that I own. As a matter of fact, when JP and I were traveling in Canada, going from university to university, and JP was speaking in the universities, I was just along for the ride because we were speaking at a conference together. I told him that when I do radio, if I've got to take phone calls from the callers who might ask any kind of question about God or Christianity, I always bring his book with me, the Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview. And I always tell them that you know, I never have time to open that book. You don't have time in a radio show to open a book and get to a resource. But I bring it anyway because I just want to have the comfort of this blankie, which is my, you know, this teddy bear, this blanket that I bring with me, which is this book, which he's responsible for. So I would highly recommend that book to you. Now, he's got a way of responding to this uncaused first cause that I thought was pretty interesting. I've adapted it to my own use, so I want to give him a hat tip for that. But take a look at it on your screen. Here is the answer I often give to people. Okay, I want you to imagine a scenario with me. Just imagine a scenario. Okay, we're serving a search warrant. You're part of a SWAT team. I've been on SWAT teams for years, so I know what that looks like. I've been at that door, getting ready to kick the door, getting ready to serve a search warrant or to get into a barricaded suspect, anything like that. So I've been there before. But imagine this time that location is barricaded, right? And the first officer is standing at the door. It could be anybody. It could be you. You turn to the next and say, "Oh, you know what? I forgot to bring my battering ram. I can't get this door open without a ram. Can I borrow yours?" And the next SWAT officer with all of his gear, he's got all of his equipment with him. He says, "Well, yeah, sure, you can borrow mine, but I forgot to bring mine too, so I'll have to borrow it from the next guy to loan it to you." So this officer, the second officer in the line, he now turns to the third and asks to borrow his battering ram. But guess what? The third guy in the line doesn't have a battering ram either, and he says, "I've got to borrow one in order to let you have it." So he turns to the fourth, and this goes on and on. No one owning a battering ram. He turns to the next and repeats it over and over and over again. And look, unfortunately, he doesn't have it. He is what JP would call a borrowing lender. In order to lend the battering ram to you, he's going to have to borrow it from somebody else, and on and on and on it goes down the chain. Unless one of these guys, unless one of these officers is what JP would call an owning lender, in other words, he's got a ram that you can borrow, well, then no one's going to have a ram to knock that door down. And if the thing being borrowed isn't a battering ram at all, but it's instead existence, okay, well, then if there isn't an owning lender of existence, that means a lender that is eternal, is self-existent, that has existence as part of its nature, it's eternal, it's a necessary being. If there's not something like that in the line, then you're not going to have existence any more than you would have a battering ram. None of us would exist as borrowing lenders, and that's all we are. we exist and then we have kids and we pass on our existence to those, but unless there's an eternal owning lender of existence, we couldn't be here to begin with. So look, yeah, do we think that there's a cause that is uncaused? Absolutely. Can you see how that kind of eternal being is both logical and necessary? Now, that's a little bit more of a mouthful, right, in order to explain to somebody. And I get that. But the story is sometimes helpful, I think, because this idea that we must have an owning lender in the chain of SWAT officers in order for a RAM to be produced and given to one of the borrowing lenders who then lends it up the line to the persons at the front door, you don't get a RAM. You don't get existence either unless there is an owning lender. So whatever it is that's out there, there has to be a first cause that is itself an owning lender of existence. So again, we're back to, we all agree, there has to be, philosophically, we know there has to be this one necessary cause that is itself uncaused. The only question left is that cause personal? Now we went kind of a long way around to get back to where we started. And I think that this, by the time we get done, is a helpful way to explain to people. And again, you may use one of those three, whichever seems most appropriate to you. You might decide that you are going to use all three kind of morph together in one way. You may just have those in the back of your mind on the shelf that you can draw from as you're speaking to your friends or family members. I think what's really helpful is, for me at least, when I first began to think about these issues as a very new Christian, I had an hour and a half drive to work in Los Angeles County. And I would spend that drive having these conversations in my head, these make-believe conversations in my head. How would I say this? So whenever I was asked this question in real life, it was never the first time I had answered it, because I had answered it in my conversations in my head for weeks, months, and years prior to this. So now is the time to use that time. Do you run? Do you exercise? Good time to think about such things. Do you have a drive of your own? Good time to start thinking about these things. When you have a moment while you're waiting in line, good time to start thinking about these. Redeem the time and start to practice these conversations in your mind. I've given you 3 tools to put in your tool belt to answer this kind of objection so that it won't become a conversation stopper. It'll just kind of become a way a catalyst for you to continue the conversation. Hope that's been helpful for you. And now we're going to take a break. We'll come back next week and offer another objection and ways in which to answer that objection to keep the conversation going. Until then, I'll see you right back here at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, Forensic Faith, and Alive.